If your body suddenly feels like it changed the channel on you sometime after 35 or 40, there's nothing wrong with you. Your hormones are just updating a network, say, and asking you to make some adjustments to your settings. Today's episode is all about decoding what those hormone error messages are really saying, why the average doctor often reads them like spam, and what you can do to start feeling like you're back in the driver's seat again, whether you're 22, 42, or 62. Welcome to the Better Beyond 40 podcast, where smart, driven women over 40 and those who support them ditch the confusion and cut through the midlife wellness nonsense. I'm Dr. Mary Pines, award-winning PhD biomedical scientist of 25 years with a decade in women's health and longevity consulting. I specialize in transforming the health and lives of midlife women from their late 30s to early 60s by delivering clarity and practical real-life solutions with honesty, compassion, and a little humor along the way. In this podcast, I'm going to share top tips, top tricks from within my one-on-one coaching program to help you redefine what's possible for yourself and feel unmistakably better beyond 40. So first of all, I want to thank you. Thank you to everybody who has listened, liked, shared, downloaded this show so far. Thank you. I so sincerely appreciate you tuning in, being here so much, and that you want to learn and explore more about your body and your health. So important. So proud of you. And I value that you're taking the time to do that here with me. So let's dive in. In this episode, I'm going to demystify what your hormones actually do. We throw that term around a lot, but what the heck? We'll talk about why your average medical provider sometimes gets the memo wrong, and how to start understanding what your unique hormones are doing. So here's where we're going today. First, we'll talk about hormones as messengers, not villains, what they are in plain language and why they get such a bad reputation. We'll also chat about how to identify hormone imbalances in your body, including how different hormone imbalances can literally change the shape of your body, i.e. how they influence fat storage, muscle building, etc. Maybe you went from pear to apple. Maybe you went from stick to bulky. We'll talk about that. I'll talk about what your major hormones do for you in relatable terms as well. And I'll even share what I'm personally taking in terms of hormone replacement. Fun and life-changing. Then we'll dig into why standard medical care often misses the full hormonal picture, especially when your labs look quote unquote normal. After that, I'll walk you through what a personalized data-driven hormone care plan actually looks like in real life. And finally, I'll offer you some simple take action tips, some steps you can start this week. Simple things, even without a provider, to get a handle on where your hormones are at and how to support them. Okay, side note here, as we get into this, if you're listening to this on the fly and wishing you could jot down a few notes because there are gonna be some juicy bits, don't worry, we did that for you. You can find the transcripts of this and all other episodes on my website, drmarypines.com. Okay, let's start with a big reframe. Your hormones, they're messengers. They're not villains. A lot of women come to me super frustrated about their hormones. Oh, why my hormones? I hate my hormones. Your hormones aren't out to get you. They're just sending messages on behalf of your body. So think of your hormones as like text messages your organs send to each other. Estrogen says, hey, bone, keep building. Progesterone whispers, hey, it's time to chill. Cortisol shouts, all hands on deck. And testosterone and DHEA are like, let's rev this engine, baby. And then your thyroid hormones, those are the ones setting our metabolic thermostat, if you will. In more accurate biological terms, what we might say is hormones are the chemical messengers released into your bloodstream from specific endocrine centers in your body. They bind to receptors on target tissues, sometimes far away from their site of release. And they trigger immense complexity in your body, intracellular signaling cascades that change gene expression, metabolism, and cell behavior. They're effectively master regulators that affect all systems in your body. Now, you might be wondering, so why do hormones get cast as the villains in the everyday midlife drama? Well, partly it's because the media loves symptoms. Hot flashes, mood swings, weight gain, those things make headlines. They make people sit up and go, oh yeah, ugh. Calm, steady hormones quietly supporting your brain, your bones, your libido, not that clickable. So the story has become, you are moody, you are weak, you are crazy. And when in reality, your body is sending just louder and louder messages because something shifted. And so that's when we start to actually really pay attention to what our hormones are doing, and it makes them seem pretty nasty. But they're only doing those things when they're out of whack, out of balance, too low, too high, or in the incorrect ratios. So here's a quick tour of some of the main hormone messages, let's say text messages that your body's organs send out to each other every single day. Bear in mind that all of the hormones have a lot of different functions. So this is, I'm going to say, brutally oversimplifying things, but I do think it's useful to have a handle on what some of these hormone friends do for us when they're functioning well. And then I'll also talk about how to know when they're not functioning well. So we'll do a little bit of both. Let's start with estrogen. This is the one we hear about all the time in relation to female health, but it's certainly just one of many. No more important, no less important. It just, for some reason, has become the lady hormone, which is kind of hilarious. Estrogen is our build and repair signal. So it signals our bones, skin, brain, blood vessels, and cardiac tissue, and so many more parts of your body to stay strong and resilient. In biology terms, we'd say estrogen affects osteoblast activity in bone. It supports collagen synthesis in the skin. It modulates neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine to keep you feeling happy and good, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that it does. Those are some of the leaders that we tend to hear about, and there are some of the more important ones people tend to want to know. So here's a real life example of estrogen in action. When your mood feels more stable and your skin feels more plump and resilient in the middle of your cycle, if you're a cycling woman, that is often estrogen delivering its collagen support and its brain boost memos, its text messages to your body. Feels really good. That said, when we have too much estrogen, we can have too much of a good thing. So that can mean estrogen is either too high or it's not balanced with enough progesterone, a term called estrogen dominance. This means we can be moody, irritable, bloated, crampy, have tender breasts, and more. This is what tends to happen to us, this estrogen dominant state, as we move into perimenopause, and it's part of why we experience PMS when we're younger too. Estrogen dominance is very common in the early to mid stages of peri, and it can also bring about some degree of change in our metabolism, namely a bit of insulin resistance, some weight gain, some other issues like that. Then this kind of hormone signature, I like to call it, leads to a more predominant weight gain in the thighs or the bum, more of a pear shape. You'll see this in younger women too. When we're younger, we tend to have dominating sets of hormones as well. Some people have more estrogen or stronger estrogen signals, more of a pear shape. Some women have more of a testosterone dominance and they have more of a slender, sort of muscular figure, not as curvy, if you will. So back to perimenopause. On the other end of perimenopause, later in the game, as we head towards menopause, we usually end up ultimately with too little estrogen. So remember, we lose progesterone first, usually in the whole spectrum of perimenopause, and then we start to lose estrogen, and by the time we're at the end, we're low in both. So too little estrogen is the thing that leads to the symptoms that most people, including doctors, associate with midlife hormone changes. But those are the things that tend to crop up later in the game. These are things like hot flashes, night sweats, dryness, pain during sex, headaches, joint pain, heart palpitations, the sort of classic menopause leader symptoms, if you will. And the point of me saying this is that by this point, most women have been suffering with the symptoms of estrogen dominance and the loss or downregulation of other hormones like progesterone for years, trying to figure that out, not realizing that progesterone is a key factor. And finally, thankfully, this is changing. Okay, let's move on to progesterone. Its message in general is time to chill. It's a nice one. So progesterone tells your brain and your nervous system, we can downshift now because it interacts with GABA receptors in the brain, promoting calm, better sleep, and soothing anxiety. GABA is our sort of negative feedback neurotransmitter. It's the thing that dampens signals in the nervous system, and we very much need it for calm. So what happens then is if we have too little progesterone, which is common through perimenopause, we can experience estrogen dominance as described above because we don't have enough progesterone to balance estrogen. But we also commonly experience symptoms resulting from the lack of progesterone, not just in relation to estrogen, but because of its calming GABA-related signals in our bodies and our brains. So when we get less progesterone, we have a reduction in those calming signals, and we end up with things like waking in the middle of the night, like 3, 4 a.m., unable to sleep. We can become irritable, or we can become ragey. We can tend towards anxiety or just not being able to relax. We can also get bloating, reduced libido, breast tenderness, especially before our periods, classic PMS thing. And we can also end up with new or enlarged lumps in our breast tissue, which actually can be kind of alarming. So just be aware of that. So if you're in perimenopause, you've probably noticed at least a few of these symptoms. For me, it was waking in the middle of the night, uncharacteristic moodiness, like, just annoyed at like the sound of my partner eating, like that kind of stuff. Like, especially in my luteal phase. I was pretty okay outside of that, but my luteal phase, that like 7 to 10 days before my period, became awful. Like I just want to punch someone. I also had uncharacteristic anxiety that I hated. I actually had my first panic attack at 40. I never knew what that was about. People would talk about them and I was like, that sounds sucky. It's sucky. That was a real wake-up call. So that was the moment I went straight to my provider and got myself some bioidentical progesterone to support me through that week leading up to my period. And boy, has that been a game changer. Once I got some of that progesterone on board, I remember, just so much calmer, sleeping like a baby through the night. And, to the point that when I woke up in the morning, I was actually confused. It had been happening for a while, like a long time by then. And so I just, I laughed with joy. I checked my Oura Ring stats to make sure I wasn't in some weird lucid dream. But no, it was real. And I was hooked. So now I use a nice bioidentical progesterone in that 5 to 7 day window before my period when I know I'm going to be a grumpy panda. And it really helps me to beat the bloating and cramps and sort of generalized malaise as well. Okay, let's move on and talk about the greatly villainized but extraordinarily valuable cortisol. Cortisol is your all hands on deck stress responder, but it also has really important functions in lieu of stress in terms of our circadian rhythm. So it's not all bad. It's actually really essential. Cortisol mobilizes glucose into your bloodstream so you can do the fight, flight, or in modern life, answer 47 emails and make 3 lunches at once. And gives you kind of that energy and pep and alertness that you need when an emergency comes up. And unfortunately, most of us don't live in an actual emergency state, but you'd look at our cortisol and think we did. So cortisol also comes up if you're overexerted, overtired, let's say. Say you pull an all-nighter or you just don't sleep well. your cortisol will be elevated the next day, and you will probably find yourself with cravings or energy crashes, reaching for coffee or sugar or wanting to snack like all damn day. And that's cortisol shouting, fuel up now, yo, your brain gonna crash. And that is not what we want. So I definitely notice this for myself. If I'm overtired, I stay up too late or whatever, I'm pretty snacky and I get sugar cravings the next day, which I don't usually get. So if you live in a high cortisol state all the time, it's just go, 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 doing all the things, probably too many things, like never resting, never slowing down. A state that I am personally very familiar with, as you learned in episode 1, then cortisol will make you constantly kind of feel edgy, jittery, restless, anxious. And over time, a lot of us actually don't even notice we're in that state anymore. So it's powerful to really witness that in yourself when you actually slow down. And that's why it's important to slow down, to actually realize how cortisol is making you feel. Indications that you are running in a high cortisol state: you're wired but tired at night, even though you're exhausted, you struggle to fall asleep. Maybe you wake up on the other end, like fully alert with your mind racing through your to-do list before you really even get your eyes open. That's a big one I look for in my clients. A lot of us, women in midlife are just so busy. And it's that cue of like not waking up nice and slow, takes 20 to 30 minutes to be fully alert, but like fully alert right away on our feet, go. That's a problem. Often people will, in this state, have an afternoon crash between waking up tired and then doing the go, go, go thing all morning into the afternoon and then crash. They feel like, oh, I need sugar, I need caffeine to get me through. And then they're wired again and tired and can't sleep at night. Kind of a vicious cycle. So another thing that can happen is that because the cortisol in your blood tells your body to release sugar into your bloodstream, a high cortisol state tends to correlate with higher blood sugar and insulin state. Over time, this often causes weight gain, and I see it a lot in clients. And it's classically in the belly and the back. So belly fat, back fat, promoting more of a kind of round apple-shaped body. That's the high cortisol hormone signature. Another thing that happens, which tends to go with this, is that your gut may be unhappy with you. You'll maybe get digestive discomfort, bloating after you eat, diarrhea, constipation. Your gut microbiome, actually, it hates when you're under a lot of stress. Your whole digestive system does. And that's because stress and catecholamines, which are other stress hormones, they literally change how your gut functions or doesn't. So they change the gut motility, how things move through, basically how your poop moves through. Digestive secretions, so the stuff that breaks down your food, allows it to absorb, nutrient availability, immune function. All of these changes reshape the microbiome composition and reduce the diversity of microbes in your gut. And that over time can feed back into mood and inflammation, and in some cases, disease risk. Bad news bears. So when people say stuff like cortisol puts you in fight or flight, not rest and digest, that's what they mean. They mean that your digestive system is literally not working very well. And over time, that's a disaster. That's why we want to sit down to eat our meals, take a few breaths before, not like shoveling food in as fast as we can and before we dive into the next thing. Not good. Those Europeans, they take some of them hours for their meals. And you know what? I bet their digestion's awesome. They do have a lot of less digestive problems than we do over here. There's a lot of reasons for that though. But one of them is certainly slowing down and taking time to eat and eating good food. So if you keep up the kind of high cortisol treadmill pattern for long enough, as in several intense months or even years in a row, you may, in fact, quote unquote, burn yourself out. And this is lingo for saying you'll end up with HPA axis dysfunction. This is a fancy word. Basically, people used to call adrenal fatigue, but that's not an accurate representation of what really happens. But in a nutshell, it's just saying your brain stops responding to stress signals in the appropriate way. It's like the little boy crying wolf, and his friends eventually stop believing him. So in that state of chronic elevated cortisol, your natural cortisol rhythms ultimately start to get screwed up. You get circadian rhythm dysregulation, where we have wakefulness and tired at the wrong times of day. And there are several stages of HPA axis dysfunction as a person gets more and more dysregulated. There's 4 official stages. The final stage being true burnout, which is a total state of exhaustion where you can't get out of bed. You got nothing. Your hormones are totally tanked and life sucks. And that's not a place you ever want to get to. I was stage 3. Stage 4 was next. And I was like, oh no. That was years ago. It took a long time to write it. These things are slow to happen generally, and they're slow to recover. Absolutely making sure we do not live in a state of being a constant stress ball underscores this discussion. And, while a small minority of people are actually diagnosed with overt cortisol disorders per se, the majority of adults in North America, the stat is about 75%, they report enough chronic stress to potentially nudge their HPA axis out of its ideal rhythm. And I do tend to see this relatively often, so just something to bear in mind. Okie dokie. Let's move on to testosterone and DHEA. I've lumped these two together, but they have separate and independent functions. And their messages fuel the engine. These guys are awesome. They're 2 very important hormones for women. Tragically, they've been labeled by textbooks, medical establishment as male hormones or androgens, which implies they're not important for women, but that's actually complete BS. It's actually insanity, that to the point that GPs and naturopaths cannot prescribe these for women unless they have specialist hormone training. Even though there's so much data in like the last many years that shows how beneficial they are for us. Anyway, most people have heard of testosterone, of course, and its benefit. Many don't realize it's super important for women. But most have never heard of DHEA, but it is amazing. So these 2 are, I'm going to call them your get shit done hormones. They support a lot of things, chiefly muscle building, muscle strength, endurance, libido, motivation, so that get up and go, the drive, healthy body composition, like muscle fat balance, great skin health, cellular energy, so many things. And actually many women who supplement testosterone call it their battery pack. They say you'll never pry it from my cold dead hands. It's pretty interesting. And DHEA, on the other hand, is an adrenal hormone that has many of its own functions. But it can also be made into testosterone and estrogen in the body. It's kind of a pro-hormone that does its own thing as well. It's super cool. And one of the major things it does is it shifts us from a catabolic state, a state of breaking down, to an anabolic state of building up, or like protein and muscle building state. It also helps with immune function, fat metabolism, brain fog, energy, moods. It even acts as a bit of a natural antidepressant for some women who are low in it, and it can reduce cancer risk. It also helps with the kind of adrenal dysfunction I described above and can improve symptoms of HPA axis dysfunction because it is an adrenal hormone. And I'm banging on about DHEA here because no one is talking about it. Med schools don't even really teach it, but it's super valuable. So I'm like spreading my DHEA gospel. And by the way, you can get all of these hormones tested by blood. It's not the best way to test them, but it's fairly expensive to test them in other ways, like in urine. So I'm just going to say blood testing for now. We'll talk about testing in another episode at some point. Okay, so what happens if you have low levels of testosterone and or DHEA? How do you know? You may feel blah, maybe low, depressed, lacking motivation, low energy, low stamina. Other things can cause this too, of course, but these are some flags. You'll probably struggle to build muscle. You might feel flabbier, or like the workouts you're doing that used to build muscle for you just don't anymore. You may also have zero interest in sex, even though you have a wonderful relationship with your partner or find the object of your desire very desirable. And that's a really shitty one. I've been there. It sucks. Yeah, testosterone has really helped me with that. But also, I believe the combination of progesterone and DHEA. The thing about these hormones, testosterone particularly, starts to decline for most women in their late 20s and early 30s. I'm going to let that land. Late 20s, early 30s, which is sort of wild. It doesn't do this for everyone, by the way. Some women retain robust levels, but that's kind of rare. So bearing in mind, this is one of the first hormones to fall, and it's pretty important. So then, what do optimal levels of testosterone and DHEA feel like? You feel that drive, that get up and go, that oomph is alive and well in you, maybe like a midday burst of energy that makes you want to tackle a project, or that feeling of like, yeah, let's do it. That can have to do with a healthy DHEA and testosterone level. You may feel like also you want to get a little sexy because of how they both support sexual function and libido. And personally, as I mentioned, take testosterone. I love it. I also take DHEA, as I mentioned. And actually, on that note, DHEA was the thing that finally fixed the brain fog that I was struggling with, like for real. It was incredible, night and day. And trust me, I tried a lot of things. I biohacked the crap out of it, tried all the stuff, supplements, etc. It was DHEA for me. I also feel more energetic on it. In Canada, it's prescription only, but in the US, it is over the counter for some weird reason. So if you get it over the counter, asterisk on that, it is not a regulated supplement. So like any supplement you take, the amount and quality of the DHEA in there is unverified. Generally speaking, there's some brands that are better than others, like life extensions. But yeah, I get mine compounded. Okay, let's move on, shall we? The next one of my personal favorites, because it is so underrepresented and under-discussed in the whole conversation around our health in general, midlife health especially, and beyond, and that's thyroid. So your thyroid produces two hormones called T3 and T4. You can think of your thyroid like your metabolic thermostat. So your thyroid hormones set your metabolism, the speed at which your cells burn fuel. Too low and everything feels slow. Too high and feel wired and jittery. In biological terms, inactive thyroid hormone, T4, gets converted into active thyroid hormone, T3. So T4 inactive, T3 is active. T3 then increases mitochondrial activity. So those are your little powerhouses in your cells, as people like to call them. And it increases your basal metabolic rate. So how many calories you are burning. Very commonly, I see a situation in which a woman has suboptimal levels of T3, or she has normal or even solid levels of T3, but they're not working properly. And this sometimes happens due to reduced receptor sensitivity. And the receptor sensitivity thing is something that's not really recognized in medicine commonly, conventional medicine, but it's really important to think about. And that's why we want to treat symptoms more than labs, because sometimes labs show normal, but the receptor is like, what? Same for insulin, right? Insulin sensitivity means insensitivity often comes with higher levels of insulin, but the cells can't hear the signal. And we can get this with other hormones too. We can get this with thyroid, for example, where there's enough T3 happening, but the receptor is like, nah. And the person is still in a low functional hypothyroid state. So when I say a low thyroid state, that is called hypothyroid. It can be subclinical, quote unquote, hypothyroid if it's not severe enough that a person's TSH or thyroid stimulating hormone is out of the conventional range, which is pretty high. Said another way, your pituitary tells your thyroid to make T4, which converts to T3. And the higher the TSH signal coming from your pituitary, that's like your pituitary, your brain being like, yo, thyroid, make more thyroid hormone. We're tired, or our metabolism is too slow. And if it's sending out more and more signal, but the thyroid isn't responding, that's when we get that elevated TSH. And at a certain point, they'll diagnose you as clinically hypothyroid if your TSH is above a number which is pretty high. But it can be below that number, and your doctor will tell you it's fine, but you're actually still somewhat hypothyroid. So subclinical hypothyroid. And that's so very common. It can happen for many reasons. One of them is just the thyroid is like a canary in a coal mine. Like a lot of your hormones, but particularly the thyroid, in response to like prolonged stress or massive inflammation in the body, the thyroid will slow things down as a kind of survival response, right? You don't want to be going really hard if other systems in your body are like, alert, alert. So this is quite a clever feedback mechanism by the body. But because we're in these stressed out, toxified, inflammatory states, a lot of the times in modern life, it can impact the thyroid and how the thyroid functions and result in a low thyroid or hypothyroid state, clinical or subclinical. There's also hyperthyroid. That's too much thyroid hormone. That's a lot more rare. It's kind of the opposite effect, like jittery, anxious, too much energy, maybe heart flutters, hot all the time, that kind of thing. So how do you know if you're struggling with low thyroid? How do you know if you're potentially some form of hypothyroid? Most common, fatigue, even when you've slept well, big red flag. Stubborn weight gain all over that leads to more of a sort of rectangle shaped body, all over weight gain. That's pretty common, something I look for in clients as a hormone signature. Other symptoms may include feeling cold a lot. Some people have dry skin, especially along the front of their shins. Constipation is common too, brittle nails, hair, that kind of thing. And when we're thinking about thyroid function, just like any other hormone, both its production and signaling efficiency tend to decrease with age and or stress, as I just mentioned. That includes cellular stress like inflammation or autoimmunity. And tragically, most conventional doctors, providers aren't testing thyroid adequately or using reference ranges for thyroid function that make any sense at all, as I just alluded to. Many will just test TSH. That is the gold standard, and that's very silly. I'm going to come back to this one and give you a real life example of what I'm talking about shortly and some frameworks for what to do instead. Okay, so those are the key hormones I wanted to outline for you today. That's by no means all the ones that are important, but those are the big headliners. They're leading the show in general. I didn't do insulin. That I feel like insulin blood sugar is a whole other pod on its own. But I don't want this to be like a Huberman style 3-hour marathon. Love him, but not my style. We'll come back to the others at another time. So the point here, summing all of this up, is that hormones will often get vilified as the bad guys. But what they're doing is super valuable. It's all signaling for you to decode. And the signals can be somewhat complicated, but when you actually get proper lab testing and you sort of look at your results and your lifestyle in tandem, then it's easier to decode what's going on. When hormone signals get garbled because of stress, inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, or even the natural process of aging, our bodies react with what we label as symptoms. These are hormone imbalances. So as much as I wish our hormones could just talk to us, send me a text message, deliver a concise but strongly worded letter if you have a problem. Hey, I didn't design this whole thing, so I hope this episode helps you with the decoding instead. So on that note, let's move on to the labs and testing part of the picture and talk about why doctors often miss the full picture when it comes to hormones. We'll talk about why you can feel exhausted, puffy, anxious, not yourself, and yet you're told you look fine, your labs are normal. See you next year. And my aim here is never, ever to cut down doctors. Our doctors are absolutely amazing at what they are trained to do. And I'm ever so grateful for them, for the pivotal roles they play in our care. And I'm acknowledging here, as any good doctor will acknowledge, health optimization and orienting towards longevity is not part of conventional training. That's just not what our medical system does. And that's okay. It's okay for doctors not to have that orientation. The conventional stance is to help sick or injured people to get well, not to help people who are doing fine, and in general, not to help women through perimenopause and menopause who are doing fine. Quote, these are air quotes. So the amount of training they get on these kinds of things, perimenopause, menopause, is minimal, if any. And most doctors will be very upfront and tell you that. So it sucks that midlife hormone care has fallen through the cracks, though times are changing. And the research and the push for better are gaining traction as more and more people like you seek better help, like me, are shouting, hopefully not into the void, about this stuff. And so here we go, a new era unfolding ahead of us. Thank goodness for our next generations. My hopes are high. Anyway, let's look at why conventional medicine misses the mark on this sort of stuff. Firstly, number one is standard labs are a single frame snapshot. Often people will come to me with lab results and they'll be like, okay, let's talk about everything going on in my body based on this. It's like, well, actually, that's not quite how it works. Most routine hormone testing or testing of any kind is like, I would liken it to taking one blurry photo in a 2-hour movie and deciding we understand the plot. So this implies two things. One, there's obviously a lot more detail and a shifting landscape day to day, hour to hour, week to week to take into consideration that we don't necessarily capture in some of your lab values, some of the very important ones. And number two, it's incredibly hard to make inferences from most routine testing, which is incredibly basic, especially in a public system like we have in Canada or in the UK, for example. So there's not a lot of markers a standard provider, a GP, can test without providing intense justification. So they're going to miss out on a lot of important markers that I would want to see to understand the picture of your hormone and metabolic health. So that's not your doctor's fault. It's the system we have. It's just, we can barely make out the actors in the movie, let alone piece together the plot based on like a complete blood count, which is not complete. It's just like red blood cells, white blood cells. Let's test your ferritin. Let's test 2 or 3 other markers for your like liver and kidneys. And that's probably most of it. Not enough. Okay, so the second reason that we often miss what's going on is that reference ranges are pathology-centric, so disease-oriented, not performance-centric, so not towards optimal. I harp on about this all the time. All the time. What I mean by that is that lab ranges are designed to pick up disease, not to measure how vibrant and energized you feel. In other words, you have to be quite unwell to actually fall outside of conventional reference ranges because they are so wide. I want you in a much narrower range for optimal function and optimal health. It makes a big difference because what's going on here is that these conventional ranges are population averages. They're based on a sick population. So that tells you something about this conventional range, which is considered normal and healthy. It's not really. So this can mean you're barely above like, oh my God, I'm about to fall over and still be told you're fine in some cases. That's a little hyperbolic, but you get what I'm saying. And for thyroid, for instance, the typical TSH range might go up to around 4 or 4.5, but most people perform and feel metabolically way better when they're down closer to the lower end of that range, between 1 and 2. So this is a major issue overall that I run into continuously in my work with clients. Docs will tell them their hormone levels are, quote, normal based on their labs, but they feel like garbage and they know something is off. And that extends to other things too: B12, vitamin D, minerals, cholesterol, blood sugar, that sort of stuff. So then they feel like, oh man, they leave their appointment feeling frustrated, discouraged, sometimes dismissed, often with a prescription for drugs that aren't going to resolve the root cause issues at hand, the things they went in for. And research shows actually clearly that when patients reach healthy, much narrower ranges for key markers, things like blood pressure, blood sugar, hormones, cholesterol, their risk for chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, cognitive decline, fatty liver, those kinds of things, they drop significantly. So it's not just about how you're feeling today, it's about your long-term health. Okay, the third reason conventional care can miss the mark when it comes to hormones is the whole synthetic versus bioidentical confusion. And this is a big one. Not all hormones act the same ways in the body. In fact, many birth control methods use synthetic hormones that are certainly not the same as what your body produces, aka they are not bioidentical or body identical. But many doctors are trained to call them by the same names as the bioidentical or body identical hormones, which is wild to me. So for instance, I will have women tell me regularly that they're on progesterone, but they're not. They're on synthetic progestins or progestogens that they're often called progesterone, but they're not. They were developed by drug companies to act similarly on the uterus as progesterone in order to fulfill a function. And they're great at that, say to stop pregnancy or stop heavy bleeding. One example, the IUD, the Mirena. However, they actually bind to progesterone receptors differently and can have opposite effects as desired on things like mood, your blood lipids, cholesterol, for example, breast tissue compared to bioidentical progesterone. And in fact, certain progestin-only IUDs, like the Mirena or injections, suppress ovulation and they lower your natural progesterone. And they create a false sense of, quote, hormone balance while actually driving some of the mood changes, sometimes weight gain, low libido, that sort of stuff. And that gets blamed on you instead of the prescription, which sucks. So something to be aware of when you take exogenous hormones. Are they body identical, bioidentical, or are they synthetic? Similarly, birth controls containing synthetic estrogen, which is most of them, and if you grew up in the 80s or 90s like I did, a lot of us were on those things for years, and they can cause low testosterone levels, very common. We're already losing our testosterone from a young age, as I discussed before, so it's no wonder at like 39 years old, my libido was in the tank. Not fun. Anyway, this is not necessarily something we want to be giving to young girls upon reflection. So yeah, if you have a young lady in your life, it's worth talking about. Reason number 4, labs don't tell the full story, missing context and the key roles of lifestyle and individual factors like sleep, stress, gut health, micronutrients, genetics, etc. So your hormones never act alone. Of course, they operate in a complex ecosystem where there's crosstalk with your nervous system, your guts, your nutrient status, and more. So we have to really look at the whole picture to understand the what, the why, and how to fix it all. For example, some forms of birth control can deplete nutrients like B6, B12, zinc, magnesium. nutrients your body actually needs to metabolize estrogen safely. Another example is SSRIs, which commonly deplete all important sodium. See this a lot. That's a big thing. And others like metformin, which is a blood sugar control drug, one of the most common drugs out there before GLP-1s came on the scene, still very common. Metformin depletes B12 and folic acid, which is B9. Very important vitamins for our health and sanity. So some of these things we can test, these markers, others we can't. We just need to be aware and factor in that awareness and look at the research to see, okay, how do these puzzle pieces work together? Because even though your blood works may say you're normal, your detox and brain chemistry are quietly struggling because there's these imbalances or deficiencies we can't see. We also need to consider how your body actually metabolizes or processes hormones. Everybody is a little different, and this is often genetic, but it can be lifestyle-based too. If your liver is struggling or your body genetically doesn't perform certain detox processes well, like, for example, methylation, big one, you may be taking something like estrogen, but your body pushes more towards certain estrogen metabolites or so-called breakdown products that worsen estrogen dominance symptoms. Things like breast tenderness, heavy periods, or weight gain, making worse the symptoms you already had. Methylation is a big thing. It's quite common for Caucasian people to have variants in the MTHFR gene pathway. I have those myself. Just some awareness there because there's little tweaks to make if you have those. So those together are some of the things I want you to bear in mind when you're advocating for yourself and thinking about how to approach lab testing, interpretation, hormone supplementation, if that's something you're interested in doing. So taking into account your whole health picture and not relying on conventional ranges or synthetic hormones unless you need them. There is a cause for them. Those think that's important. Working with a provider who has a functional lens, so functional medicine, maybe naturopathy, in conjunction with your GP is a good idea. It's never a bad thing to add to your care team. Sometimes people will be very afraid, like, oh, what if my doctor finds out? Like, I can't leave my doctor. I love my GP. That's great. Can keep your GP. Your GP will probably be stoked that you found someone who can help you with this. That's at least how they should be. And if they're not, you might want to reconsider how much you love your GP. Because the better the team around you, if you can afford to do that and make the time for that, that's going to be really helpful. 2 opinions is better than 1, especially if that one isn't necessarily schooled highly in these areas. And here I actually want to take a moment to share a story. Story time! And a poignant example of this approach in action. So I had a fairly typical client recently graduate from the Better Beyond 40 formula program. Let's call her Hannah. Hannah from Montana. She's actually from Montana. She's very cool. 49, a high-powered executive at a financial firm with multiple offices across the US. She has an insanely busy schedule, a ton of stress, a husband, 2 kids, and was dreaming about getting back to running regularly so she could do some of the fun races she used to do. Nothing crazy, just for fun. But that was like a long lost goal for her. She was in the tank and she was desperate to figure out what had become severe fatigue, brain fog, mood swings, an extra 40 pounds that she'd been struggling to get rid of for several years. She'd get rid of 10 and then they come back on, then put on another 5 and get rid of a few. It was like an awful situation. And these were all issues that collectively threatened to derail everything she valued in her life. She was really in a state when she came to me, and I'm so glad she did. And the thing is, according to her GP, her labs were normal, in air quotes. And so she felt totally brushed off for years. She knew something was wrong, kept going back to them for help, but no dice. So when we started working together, I looked at her blood work through a different lens, through like a functional lens, which focuses on optimal labs and symptoms, as opposed to simply looking at where one falls on conventional ranges and ignoring the symptoms. So, especially in midlife and beyond, it becomes much more valuable that we fall into narrower, more optimal ranges when we're talking about hormones, blood sugar, insulin, vitamin D, and other key factors that play massive roles in our longevity and disease prevention and on how our bodies actually function day to day. Taking this tack with Hannah completely changed her results and her life. We actually uncovered that she was functionally hypothyroid, meaning that she had low thyroid function that wouldn't be flagged on conventional tests, as it was not with her doctor. And her doc wasn't able to help her for a number of reasons. And this is a very common situation. The first reason was that they only tested TSH, which is pretty common, not T3 or T4. And I explained why that's a problem before, because TSH isn't even a thyroid hormone. So testing it on its own is effectively useless. So there was that. There was also reverse T3 to test. It can be the thing that opposes the action of T3, as kind of implied by the name. And then I wanted to test for thyroid antibodies as well as part of a full thyroid panel. TSH, T3, T4, reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies. Second reason, what is considered normal for all three of those markers is far from optimal. The third problem was that she'd actually been on Synthroid for over a decade to counter the hypothyroid problem. Synthroid is actually a synthetic T4 thyroid hormone. Her doctor was like, this is fine, you're fine, this is how we're dealing with this. But that's a problem because while it is the most common treatment, it's certainly not a great one. And actually, I'll explain why. There is a fascinating story about the reason it's been so heavily marketed to doctors by Big Pharma, which I won't elaborate on here. But suffice to say, it is such a racket that the ex-president of the US Thyroid Association wrote a whole book called Rethinking Hypothyroid, in which he spent the first half of the book exposing the deception around getting doctors to believe that Synthroid is the best treatment for hypothyroid. Woo! There was a whole 60 minutes episode about this too. Anyway, I digress. Synthroid often doesn't help people because it is actually just T4, and many people do not convert T4 to T3 very well, either genetically or due to inflammation or simply from aging or other conversion issues. And this is something that many endocrinologists overlook as well, but that's another story. So we switched that up too, and we had her take a natural desiccated form of thyroid, which contains T4, T3, a little talked about hormone called T2, very important, and then a whole bunch of minerals that support thyroid function that are harder to get in our food system. So we changed that up. We also looked at key factors that support thyroid and all of the hormones and energy systems of the body, which her doctor never actually tested in all of those years. Vitamin D, B12, insulin and blood sugar, inflammation, and so on. Immune health markers. These factors are so essential for metabolic and hormonal health. And so when we addressed these factors, everything changed for Hannah. She no longer struggles to resist napping in the afternoon or collapsing on the couch at 7 p.m. She's crushing it. At work, she has all day energy. She's back to running. She has no more pain when she's trying to move her body, which was a big factor. Lots of inflammation. And she even competed in a race this fall. Her moods are steady. She's more optimistic and motivated than she's been in years, rather than feeling blah and depressed. And she's finally losing the weight. She's over the moon after just 3 months working together, and this is just the beginning of her journey. She actually wrote me partway through our work together one day to say, I promise not to message you every day, but I'm celebrating. She'd just written me the day before about how happy she was. She said, recently, even a walk was exhausting and made me sore. Walked last night, felt better on return for the first time in ages. Did a run at lunch today and felt way better than I have in years. I actually have energy. I'm out of shape, but I have gas in the tank. And she's come a long way since then. So yay, Hannah. That's an example of what I mean by just taking a different tack on the conventional approach to labs and symptoms. So anyway, Hannah's story is pretty typical for my clients. Everyone has their own unique challenges by the time we reach midlife. And after many years of habits, sometimes building imbalances in the body. So what we need to do is both address those personal issues, those imbalances, or hidden stresses, plus add some generalist approaches that are widely applicable across most midlife female bodies. And that's where the 4 pillars of the Better Beyond 40 formula, as I outlined in the last episode, can actually work to reset and optimize your body and mind in a powerful, sustainable way. Okay, and just a quick word, by the way, if this episode is resonating with you and you like having your hormones explained in human language and what to do about them, it really helps when you follow or subscribe to this podcast or leave a quick review, share it with a friend, tells the algorithm, this is working. I like this. More, please. And you may really help someone who's struggling to find this show. Okay, so now let's talk about the big game changer, which is personalized data-driven care. And we can flip the switch from frustration to empowerment by understanding what good hormone care and general health care look like. So number 1, we'll do just a quick little blast through here. We want to get a comprehensive baseline. We're going to start with the full story. Your history, your cycle, stress load, sleep, medications, your goals, not just what are you coming in with today. And then we want to layer in smart testing. So that's targeted blood work, and when appropriate, we do a more comprehensive testing to see how you're actually making, metabolizing, clearing hormones, how your gut health looks, your toxic load, those sorts of things, if relevant. But like comprehensive blood work is a great place to start. And by the way, if you're interested in understanding what blood work to ask for, I'd be more than happy to share my PDF download called Lab Tests All Women Need. You can find a link to it in the show notes, or you can hit my team up at info@drmarypines and we'll send it your way. The second thing is that you want to understand what your unique hormone signature looks like, since everyone's is different. The pattern of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, thyroid, insulin, cortisol, they offer specific symptoms in your body when they're imbalanced, and we can decode those by looking at your symptoms and your labs a lot of the time. So mapping that signature allows us to see where the balance is off. Thirdly, iterative monitoring is a good idea. So instead of guessing, we would retest every few months and ask, did that change? What's happening? Are we moving the needle? We can also monitor your real-time data from a wearable, like a watch or a ring, to see how your body's responding day in and day out, and on an everyday basis to what you're doing and the changes you're making. How you're sleeping, whether you're recovering well from workouts, what did your body think about that food that you ate or that new supplement, and like how stressed out is your body, that kind of thing. So then it becomes a really fun kind of conversation with your body. It's fascinating. So you make an adjustment, do your labs, and your symptoms answer back, and together we fine tune. Number 4, you can leverage a lot of key lifestyle factors that talk to your hormones, and that's part of data-driven care too. It's not just about slapping on bioidentical hormones or supplements or things like that. It's about your lifestyle. That is good hormone care, pivotal. Your lifestyle is literally how you speak the language of your hormones, how you influence their function. This goes for the hormones, by the way, that you make and the hormones you take supplementally. So functionally, they respond to healthier living in a positive direction and unhealthy living in a negative direction. So just know, like, you can take all of the supplemental hormones in the world. So that's hormone replacement therapy, HRT, BHRT, MHT. There's many names now. But if you're not supporting those hormones to work well in your body, they won't do a lot for you. You still have to put in the effort. And there are tons of aspects to a hormone supportive lifestyle. Many of them are simple and easy, and I'll be diving into them in other episodes for sure. Things like circadian rhythm, meal timing, stabilizing your blood sugar, stress reduction, strength training, targeted nutrition, all of that kind of stuff. These things create a better environment for hormone function in your body. And the outcome of all of this, when you factor these aspects of care together, so your comprehensive baseline testing, understanding your unique hormone and metabolic signature, iterative monitoring, and then leveraging key lifestyle factors, you stop feeling like your body is betraying you, and you can start to say like, oh, there's the reason I feel this way. There's the path forward. You're no longer at the mercy of seemingly random symptoms, and you know the why, and you have knobs you can actually turn to help yourself get better. Empowering. It's like upgrading from a fuzzy black and white TV where you're squinting to guess the plot to a 4K massive screen with subtitles where you can finally see the detail and the colors and actually enjoy the show instead of wondering what the hell is going on. Okay, so that wraps up that part. And as we close the show, I just wanted to shift into a different tack and offer you some ways to land all of this with simple actions you can take this week, even if you don't have a functional provider to help you out yet. I'm just going to offer you 4 quick tips here. The first one, name your top symptoms. Grab a piece of paper or open your notes app and write down your top hormone-related or maybe seemingly unrelated, because you never know, symptoms. Gut issues, sleep issues, moodiness, energy crashes, weight changes, brain fog, libido, all of that stuff. Get them out of your head and onto paper as the first step in shifting from like, oh my God, I'm a mess to, all right, here's my starting point. Number 2, ask for a basic lab panel. Get whatever you can at your next doctor's appointment. Ask your provider for a hormone-related panel because you're in this phase of life and here are your symptoms. You've got them all written down. Plus, you'd like fasting glucose and fasting insulin. Those ones are important to look at this phase of life. And you can frame it as like, hey, doc, I want to understand my hormones and blood sugar and how they may be affecting my symptoms. Is there any reason not to check these? You should get support. Number 3, you could start a 1 week, just 1 week, food and sleep log for 7 days. Just jot down what you eat, your sleep times, if you're waking in the night, and for how long, your energy, your mood, those sorts of things. And look for patterns. There's often patterns that people don't really pick up on until they're actually intentionally aware. So like, are my late night carbs, popcorn with my movie after dinner, followed by 3 a.m. wake ups or hot flashes? Does skipping protein and breakfast or skipping breakfast altogether lead to a crash and like crazy cravings in the afternoon? What if you did the opposite? This is free, powerful data that can help inform your journey tremendously on your own without any help. Number 4, use the data that you gather along the way to have a better conversation with your provider. So as I mentioned, bring it all. Bring your symptom list, your labs, and your food and sleep log to a hormone literate practitioner. Someone comfortable discussing things like bioidentical hormone replacement options, lifestyle tweaks tailored to your life and your unique situation. And the goal there is partnership. It's not perfection, but you want a partner you feel comfortable with who allows you to speak and to be heard and to be responded to in kind. So you and your provider are co-investigators in your health, not sort of judge and defendant. That's never awesome. It feels like shit. And it's a lot of how I think people orient to going to the doctor, which is not cool. You can change that. That should never feel like the case. Okay, that's a wrap. That was a jam-packed episode. And as I mentioned, you can find the transcript on my website, along with the free recommended lab work download I mentioned before for midlife women. And as we wrap up, I'd love you to come away with this overarching message. Your hormones are just messengers. And when they go awry, that's your body's way of saying something here needs your attention. Or we need to change how we're doing things around here because I'm not happy with this anymore because we be changing. So I'd love you to adopt the reframe of my body is betraying me to my body is communicating with me and I'm willing and able to respond. A typical 10-minute doctor visit with a cursory set of lab values is not the whole story. And if you've been dismissed or told it's just aging, you're allowed to want more and you deserve more. You deserve better. So if you're ready to replace confusion with a clear data-backed roadmap, check the link below in the show notes or head to my website, drmarypines.com. Watch my masterclass. It's also free to know who I work with, who I can't work with, and what I could possibly do to help you. Thank you so much for listening. See you soon.